All right, cool. So welcome everyone to the fourth workshop. It's going to be about how to pitch, and it'll be by us too. So yeah, this is just like a disclaimer that this meeting will be recorded. So that when you're if you're in this meeting, that this means that you consent to being recorded. And then if you're not comfortable with being recorded, just exit the meeting now, and you'll be able to access the recording once like after this meeting. So cool. So I guess like a little introduction. I guess Zach can go first about like who we are.
Yep. Thanks, Weldon, for the introduction. So a little bit about myself. I am a health hacks director. Um, I started doing healthcare hackathons around 2 to 3 years ago. The first one I attended was with Will. That's something similar to this. That kind of got the ball rolling. And since then, I've enjoyed doing a couple of like entrepreneurial ventures. I am a rising sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania, and I worked a lot out of the venture lab on campus, where kind of like an accelerator for startups. Currently building a venture there. And currently I am a summer intern. I'm working at Caterpillar. I work in the environment, health, and safety department, doing all of that to support our 100,000 employees. So that's just a little bit about myself. I'll pass it off to William to do his intro as well.
Yeah, sure. So I'm also like one of the directors, and then I've like the first hackathon that I went to was with Zach, and it was in I think like 2019 or something like that. It was a long time ago, but we were in different tracks, but then like our team like built like an EKG with a wristwatch or something like that. So it was gonna detect like rare arrhythmias. So like that was like the first one. And then like I also went to one in San Francisco in 2020. And then that one was with this group of people, and then we made like a reusable ostomy bag. And then that's because one of the participants actually had an ostomy, so we got like inspired by her condition and her problems, so we created this like reusable ostomy bag. And then that really inspired me to with my own research, so I created like a stronger adhesive for ostomy patients and for the ostomy bag, so like the ostomy would bag would stick a lot easier. And that eventually got like allowed me to like publish like the work that we've worked on. So like yeah, that's like why I really am passionate about healthcare hackathons, because like I really have been involved like a lot in my like life. So cool. I guess yeah, Zach can go first with this.
Yep. So the point of this workshop, we're going to be talking about some suggestions we have for you guys when you're building your projects, when you're ideating your projects, and also when you're ready to pitch. The one of the neat things about this event compared to a normal hackathon is it kind of gives you the practice and exposure of building a product comprehensively. So that's kind of the takeaway we want to go with this. So we want to leave you guys with a couple of key points. The first one really is, as you're getting started, define the problem. One of the biggest mistakes people make is that the first thing they do is jump into the solution. They try to list out everything in the solution and try to flush it out, but lose sight of the problem. So a really helpful thing to do actually is to emphasize the need and the issue. By doing so, you should create a definition for your issue. So, I mean, there are broad definitions you can make, and we encourage you not to do this. We'll give you an example. For example, perhaps you're working on a device to increase medication adherence for asthmatics. That I just gave you a really, really broad definition, a really broad scope of my project. But I could be more specific by saying something like, hey, asthmatics, particularly like young teenagers and adults, they may overlook their condition. They may skip dosages of their inhalers. Why? Because they live a busy life, school life, family life, etc. So, being really specific about all components and elements of your issue will be helpful. And it'll be especially helpful for the judges to kind of understand as well. Moving on to the second key point, we want to implore you all to investigate. So when we say investigate, we want you to think comprehensively about, who's involved with your product. In healthcare, or in health in general, oftentimes it's not just the patient who will be your main customer, right? And healthcare is one of those weird industries where you have multiple customers, right? You have the healthcare provider, you have the insurance company. So health tech, healthcare management, anything healthcare in general, you do have to be cognizant of all these different stakeholders. Um, but we implore you to investigate what is the value, what's the importance, what are things that are important to each stakeholder, right? What does the patient care about? What do the healthcare providers care about? What do the insurance companies care about? Think about it from all of their perspectives. And from there, it really kind of help you investigate, okay, what's the value in our product? And then from there, you can really estimate, okay, how big is your target market? What's the size of the audience? And what value does your product actually bring to the market? Um, and in doing so, you can also think about, what percentage of the market you can capture realistically with your product. So being able to understand where's the value in it will help you do all these things.
Yeah, and then the final key point is like you should like build and construct your like ideas. So you should talk about like the specifics with your idea, like how specifically does that address the problem, like from to like today's keynote, right? Like the Darren, he talked about like finding a problem, right? And then you have to find a way, like the solution. How does it tackle that problem? And like that's how like be irresistible. So it's about the same thing, right? So you should talk about like specifically like the technical specifications and then like some of the backing of that. And then also you should like talk about like the market and then the value of your product. So like about like the impact of your product, like how's it scalable, how's it usable, and then like you can see later and like we'll show like sample slides of like our like pitch, and then just like how like your product is better than the other stuff that's out there right now. That's like really important to differentiate yourself from the competitors. And then like lastly, it's nice to have like steps about like what you're going to do in the future. So like future steps, like maybe like 1 to 2 years in advance. Yeah. And here's like some of like the judging criteria as well. So
Definitely. So the first criteria the judges will be looking for is innovation and multidisciplinariness. And I mean, you're at a health tech hackathon, so shouldn't be too much of an issue to create something innovative. But we do want to leave you with a couple notes. Make sure you're creating a novel idea that demonstrates some sort of interdisciplinary combination of multiple fields of expertise. Right. Some of the most successful teams, you will see their entire team lineup. People have diverse roles. You have a user designer, you have a business strategist, you have healthcare policy experts, you have maybe an engineer or a computer scientist. So we do value that diversity, and the judges do as well. So make sure you do consider that. Also, another thing we want to leave you all with is oftentimes people think they have to solve the biggest issue in society right now. And we would say that's not necessarily true. You can find a very niche and very small yet still big issue even in healthcare, maybe affecting even if it still affects a couple million patients, it's a couple million lives you have the ability and potential to reach and impact, right? So even if it's a niche area, a niche issue, it's okay if you tackle that as long as you solve it really well. And oftentimes, actually, the most successful startups and projects and products are centered around this really niche and small yet really important issue, and they solve it really well as well. Moving on to the next judging criteria, it's scalability, right? Judges want to see that this product, has the potential to scale and potential to be used, right? Because that's where it's actually going to save lives and to help people. We want to make sure you are including some sort of business or policy implementation model. Make sure it's viable. Make sure it makes sense. Talk about all your stakeholders, right? The patient, the insurance provider, if applicable, the healthcare provider, if applicable. Talk about what value they each have, right? So that you can realistically say, hey, they still care about this, and maybe they will care about it for the next 50 years because this market's growing. Talk about that viability in the long term. Also, constantly evaluate, is this problem relevant? The problem you're tackling, is it relevant? If so, will it be relevant tomorrow, in the next 3 to 5 years, the next 10 years? Think about that as well. And finally, also forward looking, what's going to be your go-to-market strategy? You don't have to be, super in depth, but I mean, we'll show you an example, but we do want to see some sort of like feasible strategy as well.
yeah, and lastly, like the main point judges will look for is just technical soundness and feasibility. So like it should have like a strong backing in like what today's technology is. Like you don't want it to be something like out of fantasy. So just make sure like you explain it well, like how you are gonna if you're making an app, like how is it going to work, and then also if you're making a device, like how is that going to work, right? It should have like some kind of clinical based like backing, so like with research, and also like it should be like pretty advanced and ahead of its time, but then it shouldn't be like too hard to implement, because if it's like too hard, then it might not be like very feasible for that to happen. So yeah,
Yep.
that should be good. Thank you so much for listening. And do you guys have any questions?
Any questions? It can be pitch related, product related. It can be event related, judging criteria related. Anything, just feel free to ask. Should we include our contact information at the end? So I don't think that's necessary. Just include your background and what value you bring to the team.
Yeah, that's not necessary. So yeah.
Mhm.
That's a good question though. Anyone else?
I also got a direct question saying, do you know where I can get a copy of the slides? And the answer to that is, well, this recording will be up on YouTube, so you can watch this. We won't be posting the slide file though, but the recording's all there for you. Can the product or service be a nonprofit solution? Definitely. So I know we did stress a lot about value proposition and what's valuable to investors and stuff, and that's all like for profit, but it definitely can be nonprofit. And actually, like in last year, we did have a lot of successful projects that were nonprofit, and we matched them up with nonprofits and they worked together. So it can definitely be nonprofit, and oftentimes nonprofit, maybe your stakeholders will shift, right? Um, maybe you'll receive funding from the government, right? And then that covers your expenses. You don't really have to worry about earning a profit to cover your expenses, right? Maybe you apply for grants, maybe you're crowdfunding. So there are different ways to do it. But yes, definitely you can do not for profit. That's totally fine as well.
Yeah, anyone else?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Just to confirm, it is okay to present a prototype of our application in the final presentation, right?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine, right? But like it's not required, is what we're saying. Like not like some people like they won't have one, so like you don't have to like you just like present it well, if that makes sense. But like yeah, if you want to put one in, feel free to put one in.
Okay, thank you.
I got a direct question as well. So their question is, how exactly do you go about finding the problem? Because oftentimes I find myself finding solutions to the problem that already exists, but what's your process on finding the problem to begin with? So I can take a stab at it first, and Will, you can jump in as well.
Mhm.
I think that personally, from my experiences from doing this, from trying to build a venture at school, I think problem discovery is I've had the most success with it just by talking to people. So, for example, Will and I, we happened to meet this vascular surgeon from Brazil. One of the cool things about virtual events, you can meet people from around the world. You won't know who you meet, and we were just talking, and he was just talking about how like he knew a friend or he had just treated a patient with PAD, and as a doctor, it's disheartening for him because he doesn't want to see a patient lose their leg every time. So talking to I mean, obviously, I don't think there are a ton of doctors like on this call, for example, you can talk to, but hearing stories, I think stories are pretty powerful. They do kind of motivate you to say, okay, this really is a problem. Now, how can we solve it, right? So I think a lot of, I mean, listening to people talk, talking with people, having those discussions. If you don't get the chance to talk to people, looking up, articles like, okay, what's going on in the healthcare industry, or for example, what's a condition or disease that's affecting a lot of people, and trying to avoid those articles where they talk about like, oh, this company just raised so much money because they created this idea behind it, right? Or any solution article. Just think about, yeah, just try to really visit what's something that you think can be solved and should be solved, and is kind of a problem out there, and I think having discussions is one of the best ways.
Yeah, I completely agree with Zach. Like honestly, like just like talking to people, and then I think like for sometimes like if you have a personal problem, and like that is like one of the like biggest motivators, right? Like one of our like in the ostomy situation, right? Like one of the like team members had an ostomy herself, so she experienced those like firsthand, and like she felt like there was like no solution, so she sought out to find one, right? So like if you maybe find someone that has that personal problem, right? It is good to like talk with them. That's good. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, going once, going twice.
Really quick question.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Last question. Are you guys mentors or judges or directors or?
We're just directors. So like we're like running the whole event. So yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay.
Yeah. But do take advantage of the mentors. They come from great backgrounds. Also directors too. We're always happy to help. DM, come out to office hours. Self signups are available. You know, and we're happy to talk through anything. At what point in pursuing the solution do you or should you recognize feasibility as a driver for whether you continue? Really good question. In terms of feasibility, I think if you're looking at something, I think kind of sad, but oftentimes a lot of the feasibility element comes down to costs, right? Can you make enough to I mean, there are different types of costs, but I think the main one is like operating costs. Can you make enough to fulfill that and get yourself go like out above the ground? There are other things too, though. So, for example, when you create a product and you're going consumer, for example, you know, our product, which is a sock, it's not cheap sock. It's not something you can manufacture really, really cheaply, right? And so for us, you know, we knew that it's not feasible to launch this product within a year, right? We knew that we needed to do more R&D. We needed to find a way to drive down production costs for something like when you have a sock that has components like hardware components in it, no way we can get this cost down within a year. Maybe a couple years we can. So thinking about, I think a lot of it comes down to costs, also pricing. So we knew that we couldn't price like $100 for a sock. No one would buy that, right? But we had to find that balance. Okay, maybe we need to talk to healthcare providers, insurance companies, and say, okay, where can we strike even in terms of their costs from this disease and how much it'll cost them? Because if you know if they're buying a bunch of socks, if the VA is buying a bunch of socks from us and it's saving much more than they would have without the sock, that's a good investment for them, right? But you know, having these discussions, I think, is one of again a really good way, especially when you're building a product of venture, to kind of test out feasibility in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different avenues. But I do think it comes down a lot to the costs.
Yeah, I actually think also like not only cost, but like how well your like solution solves the problem. Like if your like solution like solves the problem like extremely well, like there is no cost to it. Like people who are desperately in need of that problem, they'll like buy it, right? So like as long as it's like very like convincing that like, oh yeah, like this solves something that like nothing else can, right? Like then that's like how feasible it is, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's value. If no one, like Darren Cook said this morning in his keynote speech, if people don't think your product is irresistible, we're going to have problems long term as well, profitability. But even in the short term, you might see your product just dissipate within a couple years, couple months. So you want to make sure that, and a lot of this is done through customer discovery, saying, do people love your product and would they be willing to use it? Okay, now at that point, what's their willingness to pay? And then you can go from there, and you can go on a lot of different tangents from there. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, do they value your product? Is this something they really want? And they would buy it like that, right? That's going to be a really big driver of feasibility and success.
Yeah. All right, I guess final round of questions. Anyone else? Okay, if not, then I think we can yeah, so like thank you everyone for showing up, and then we really appreciate it. And then also a quick announcement, someone like Shani put in the link in the chat, like if you want to sign up for office hours, feel free to do that. This will, if you need any feedback from any of the officers or like the directors, that'll be a good time. So yeah, thank you so much again, and we'll see y'all later then.
Yep, thanks so much for coming out. Best of luck.